With the presidential election quickly approaching, we asked two of our fellow Warren Area High School students to join us in the Dragon's Lair for a debate. My name is Jackie Peterson. Please enjoy.
The first question will go to Mr. Storm Sivak. Mr. Sivak, what role do you think the government should play in healthcare? You have a minute and 30 seconds. Begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Nick. I believe that the government should have a limited role in healthcare, but I believe that those that it does serve should work to serve everyone. I believe in the effectiveness of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. I believe that its public option is effective. It covers as many people as possible, although I still believe that private insurance should be able to be run. By doing this, you're able to incorporate everyone. You can choose your plan. I trust you to choose your plan, whether you feel you get the best coverage from a private plan or a public plan. I also believe that by doing this, the capitalism market really ramps itself up. By having this competition between the public option and the private plan, the government is able to lower and prices will sort itself out, so it's the most effective for you and you get to choose that. I believe that the federal government also has a right to serve the American people, and thus they should be able to work to control and lower prescription drug prices. Now, the Republicans claim that they have a beautiful plan. We have yet to see that plan materialize. If you feel safe with your plan, the Democrats protect that plan. Right now, they protect pre-existing conditions. The Republicans claim that they protect pre-existing conditions, but there is no evidence that supports that as of yet. The executive order that the president passed was merely superficial and has no executive power to it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sivak. Mr. Demers, you may give your opinion when you are ready.
Thanks, Nick. So one of the things we have to remember about the government being involved in healthcare is that America was founded on a free market system, so the government was never intended to be involved in the market, to be affecting economic policy. We have to remember so once Aristotle said that there are two competing virtues in life are mercy and justice. So I think that applies to this in saying that it's not about whether somebody needs health care, it's about whether somebody has worked to deserve their health care. And what Obamacare does is it takes our tax money from the working person and then uses that to pay for somebody else's health care. And there's also a practical reason Obamacare is not that effective. What it has done is it's created a whole other class of uninsured people. So if you have somebody who works for their money, an average middle-class family, and then you have somebody, let's say the mother works at Walmart, the father is unemployed, and they have 3 kids. They're obviously struggling for money. If the working-class family pays some of their tax money to the family who makes the lower income, the lower income family may be able to afford better health care, whether it's through Obamacare, while the family that now works, they now have to pay higher premiums for their own health care. They make too much money to qualify for the discounts under Obamacare, and now they can't afford their own health care.
I'm sorry, Mr. Demers, that is your time.
Do I get a rebuttal?
Yes, you do. It is going to be 30 seconds. Begin when you are ready.
Okay. I agree with Judd on many positions here. I can understand the worry that you have in paying taxes to support other people in their health care. But as the virtues of the Declaration of Independence outline, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life comes first, and the America that I live in and that you all live in should strive to protect as many people as possible with health care. But I still trust you. I trust the American people to make the right choice, whether that's a public option through the Affordable Care Act or through a private plan.
That is your time, Mr. Sivak. The next question, we will begin with Mr. Demers. Mr. Demers, should the government put more regulation on guns? And if so, how? If not, why? You may begin when you're ready.
So I don't believe that we should have more regulations on guns. The Second Amendment states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment was imposed to prevent a possibly tyrannical government from trying to control its citizens. So by imposing more regulations on guns through the government, that would be trusting the government to take away our safeguards against a not trustworthy government. So the legislative and executive branches were never meant to have the ability to suspend gun privileges. The judicial branch may be able to say, if this man committed a murder, if he somehow got out of prison, then he wouldn't be able to buy a gun, use a gun again throughout the rest of his life. But the legislative and executive branch shouldn't have the power to, say, pass a blanket law that suspends anybody who's ever committed a crime from ever owning a gun. Some people say that the right to own a gun only applies because of militias, but we have to remember that the smallest minority group in America is the individual. So any individual has all the rights as any other individual. You don't get any more rights by being part of a group like a militia, and you don't get any fewer. The right to keep and bear arms is granted to the individual.
All right, thank you, Mr. Demers. Mr. Sivak, you may start when you are ready.
Well, Judd stole some of my talking points, which is fantastic. He saves me a bit of time. I completely agree with Judd's description of the history of the Second Amendment. I myself support the Second Amendment very strongly, and just as well as Judd. He mentioned the militia. We have a militia, the Pennsylvania National Guard. There is where you can be well-trained, as the Constitution outlines in the Second Amendment. That is where you get the majority of your Second Amendment right. I do agree that you should have the right to the Second Amendment as an individual, as Judd stated. I mean, here in Pennsylvania, we're hunters, we're outdoorsmen. You should definitely have that right. It's your constitutional right. Along with that, I do believe that we should have some common sense background checks. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to lose. So your right will not be infringed if you haven't done anything wrong. So you're not losing a right if you already deserve it. So, along with, if you don't impose restrictions on guns, I'm not saying you should impose massive restrictions, but you also have to consider the larger weapons. Nuclear weapons, missiles, rocket launchers, extraneously strong weapons. Should people be allowed to have those? Does that fall under the Second Amendment, under your right to bear arms? Do you feel safe with those types of weapons of destruction in your neighborhood? Just a question to consider. The National Militia, the Pennsylvania Militia, is there to defend against the tyrannical government.
Thank you, Mr. Sivak. Mr. Sivak, do you think the death penalty is justifiable? You may begin when you are ready.
I do not feel that the death penalty is justifiable, Nick. I believe that it falls under the Eighth Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment. The American Civil Liberties Union also mentioned that the death penalty is unequally applied to certain races, which is unfortunate. It also affects socioeconomic status. Those who are less able to defend themselves usually fall to the captives of the death penalty. For those that are fiscally conserved, it's also fiscally irresponsible. It costs more money to go through the multiple trials required to ensure that they receive justice than it would be to keep them in prison for life. It's just a simple fact that way. Another thing to be concerned about, most violent crime can't be deterred by the death penalty. Police officers and studies have shown that it doesn't deter crime. Since 1973, the lifetime of my parents, over 156 people have been convicted to death by the death penalty. But then they were acquitted. So it's just unjust. The number of people the evidence has shown that it's not the most effective method and it's unjustifiable. The justice system is for reform, not to kill people. Sorry.
Storm, we're going to give you back 10 seconds. Sorry, folks, we had a slight interruption here at the Dragon's Lair. Storm, you have an additional 10 seconds on the clock. You may begin.
Okay. The justice system is meant for justice as it lays out. Reform, not results, are necessary.
All right, thank you. Mr. Demers, if you would like to go on.
Yes. Okay. So I don't believe that any penalty, including the death penalty, can be considered cruel or unusual in all circumstances. So while the death penalty may not be justifiable for somebody who kills someone, it might be justifiable for, say, someone like Timothy McVeigh, who was one of the most famous death penalty cases, blew up a building and killed 168 people, injured 800 others. I would argue that the death penalty is justifiable for that specific case, for all the pain and destruction that he has caused. So he would be removed from civilized society and sent to hell, where he would receive justice for his actions. Some people argue that the death penalty shouldn't be applied because we risk convicting the innocent and sentencing them to death. But I argue it should only be done when there is indisputable evidence, but imprisoning the innocent is also wrong, and we just can't simply empty our prisons based on that risk. And according to a 2017 study by Chapman University, about 20.3% of people are very afraid of death, and 31% are just afraid. If we have more people afraid of committing a crime that would justify the death penalty, you would have fewer people committing the crime. But that's never been fully proven. Currently, there's 41 crimes punishable by death in the U.S. 18 have been used and not in court, and not all of them have been successful.
Thank you, Mr. Demers. Mr. Sivak, your rebuttal.
I agree with many of the points that Judd said, but most of the violent crimes that are committed are out of rage or influence from alcohol or other addictive drugs. So it is not their plan to kill or do so. It is out of a fit of rage or influence. So to be judged by the living on those cases while you're under the influence, I find to be just morally unjust. That's left for God.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sivak. Our next question, we will begin with Mr. Demers. Mr. Demers, do you think the government should take a more active role in combating racism? You may begin when you are ready.
So, as far as the question is phrased, I don't think the government should take a more active role. What the government needs to ensure is that all U.S. citizens have the same rights, but we need to make a clear distinction between a right and a privilege. So, people all across America, regardless of race, sex, or anything, are born with privileges, usually because of their parents' social status. Again, regardless of race, if you have a black lawyer and a white drug addict, obviously the black child is going to have a higher privilege simply because of his parents' status. I would bring up the fact that, let's say you have, well, a lot of people argue that there is a racial wage gap, but a wage is not necessarily a right as declared by the government. So you don't have a right in the Constitution to be paid a certain amount of money for anything. The government's not here to make us equal in every possible way, because otherwise we would all be equally poor. No one is forced to work in any specific place. We have a right to quit, move somewhere else, or seek reform. The main idea of the justice system is that we can seek reform socially. So the government, as far as the 14th Amendment, all citizens of the U.S. have the same rights. The laws of America don't suppress any group based on race. There's no law granting whites or any other race more rights than blacks or any other race. So I believe that the government has gone as far as it needs to go in combating racism.
Thank you, Mr. Demers. Mr. Sivak, you may begin when you are ready.
I'm going to say it. Black lives matter. That does not imply that white lives don't matter, Asian American lives don't matter, Native American lives don't matter. It simply means that black lives matter. African Americans and people of color have been treated unjustly for far too long. Since our nation's founding, they've been treated with extreme disrespect. They deserve more respect than they receive now. Education is often proposed as a solution to the racism that we still experience in America. I agree with that, but it's not enough. Action needs to be taken upon the education that is discovered. Justice is deserved for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Tamir Rice, people who were unjustly treated, unjustly murdered. As you can see in America, white people who have committed heinous crimes, often been blessed with their ability to walk out of the crime scene alive. Will people such as George Floyd, who was sitting in his car, or Breonna Taylor sleeping in her bed, or Tamir Rice playing on the playground, were unjustly killed and not allowed to continue with their lives? I just ask that you think of that and that the government take more action to eliminate the racism in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Sivak. Mr. Demers, your rebuttal when you are ready.
So, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of blacks or any other race as far as whether they're discriminated against. I'm just saying that it is not necessarily the government's responsibility to give blacks more privileges, whether they deserve the privileges or not. By the government giving everybody rights, we are all equal under the law. Things like affirmative action, they look great on paper, they sound great on paper, but they often have other consequences. It can lead to people being chosen only because they are black. And to me, a law requiring that a certain number
Sorry,
of...
Mr. Demers, that is your time. Our next question takes a more personal route, and we will start with Mr. Sivak. Mr. Sivak, what issue are you most concerned with? What issue do you bring to the table today that you would like to discuss that has not already been discussed?
Thank you,
You may
Nick.
begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Nick. I believe that the climate crisis is the biggest crisis facing our generation and future generations. 97% of scientists have stated under the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and from NASA that humans have unequivocally attributed to the increase in temperature that our planet has seen. Wildfires on the West Coast, droughts and floods in the Midwest, mass migration from the south, and rising sea levels on the coasts can clearly show the signs that we have yet to face. Hurricanes have increased just this year. But despite this challenge, we have an opportunity, an economic opportunity. This opportunity comes in the form of jobs, green jobs, good paying jobs, specifically in agriculture. Should the government choose to subsidize agriculture in a green way, we would be able to execute no-till farming and silviculture, which will help our planet immensely. In addition to this, there is renewable energy in the form of solar, wind, hydroelectric. There's numerous opportunities that will save us from emitting the harmful greenhouse gases that we emit so much of. In addition to this, refrigeration management. I'm sure you're going to joke, yes, refrigeration management, insulating your homes, yes. It really helps. It saves the amount of energy. It saves you money from heating your house. So it really helps. It's the #1 cause of heat loss and energy production from
I'm sorry,
coal
Mr.
and oil.
Sivak, that is your time. Mr. Demers, your issue of choice that you've brought to the table today. You may begin when you are ready.
Okay, so I would like to bring up the problem of illegal immigration across the border. We see a lot of people crossing specifically the Mexico border, because it's a land border instead of a sea border, completely illegally. Again, Aristotle brought up two virtues, mercy and justice. Mercy is easiest to support because it has visible short-term effects that people can see, and it's supported by those who reap the benefits, which in this case would be the illegal aliens coming across the border. We think we're doing justice to our fellow humans by letting the illegal aliens in, but we are not doing justice to the Americans who are already here, because it costs them money to then pay for these illegal immigrants. If we don't, it is not America's responsibility to punish the illegal immigrants for just setting foot in the country. I would argue that we just need to gather them up and send them back to Mexico unless they come back in through the proper channels. This would apply to anybody who gets to America, not just Mexicans. And even those who ignore the idea of justice for all cannot ignore the statistics. About 70% of population growth in America is from illegal immigration and their children whose births are paid with our tax money. About 30% of federal prisoners in America are illegals. About 50% of gang murders are committed by illegal immigrants, and 95%
I'm sorry, Mr. Demers, that is your time. Our last question here is a little bit more free form. I would like the both of you to create closing arguments as to why people should vote for the candidate whom you are in support of. We will be starting with Mr. Demers. Begin when you are ready.
So, Donald Trump supports most of the issues that I've described here, as far as the sides that I've argued. He's going to be trying to fight for America first, which is the primary form of any government, to protect its own citizens ahead of any other country. He's going to be fighting for the common American people. He's going to be making sure that we're all equal under the law, but there still needs to be a middle class, which Joe Biden would not be able to support. We would end up seeing richer people, and we would end up seeing most of the middle class start fading into the poor class.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Demers. Mr. Sivak, you may begin when you are ready.
Judd's claims on, actually I'm going to start out with Joe Biden. He's more important right now. With the botched pandemic that our current president has executed, we need a president who has a plan. Joe Biden has a plan. He wants to keep you safe. He wants to ensure that you get safe care for yourself with your choice. Joe Biden believes in science over fiction. Joe Biden believes in the climate crisis. He believes that it's necessary for us to act on this crisis. Donald Trump believes that raking the forest is the answer. Fiction. Truth over lies. Joe Biden chooses truth over lies. Donald Trump has told over 20,000 lies in office. That doesn't include before his term. And you can only expect that number to go up. Joe Biden tells the truth, simply put. You, as the American people, deserve to know the truth, and with the president who tells lies so often, you're not treated well. Joe Biden chooses unity over division. Donald Trump has flamed the fire of division for far too long. Joe Biden would be a president for the American people. He would serve everyone, those that didn't vote for him and those that did. Donald Trump is merely put to serve his cronies in the highest positions of office, himself, the rich people, and the people that voted for him, his base, not everyone. In conclusion, vote for Joe Biden to restore the soul of this nation, as I will.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sivak, and really thank the both of you. We are really glad that we could have you down here in the Dragon's Lair. This was, at least from my point of view, a very fun exercise. From the Dragon's Lair, I'm Nick Norrod. All right, thanks, guys.